Great, thank you. All right, what I want to talk to you about today is a new working group that we're launching, or it's been launched, the Security as a Services Working Group, aka the SecAS Working Group. I don't care what anyone says, we have the coolest working group name out there. So, everyone is obviously familiar with what CSA does and what we're all about, but I want to draw your attention for a moment to the Csa Mission Statement. The first part of the mission statement is to promote the use of best practices for providing security assurance within cloud computing. And if you look at what the CSA has delivered to date, most of it has focused on that part of the mission statement. That's the part that says, hey, my organization is building something in the cloud, and I want to make sure that it's secure. But there is a second part to the mission statement, and that's the piece highlighted in red, provide education on the uses of cloud computing to help secure all other forms of computing. So that's the situation where security vendors are leveraging the cloud to deliver security as a service. And let's be honest, when we walk through those expo doors later today, the vast majority of security vendors are going to have some sort of cloud or SaaS-based offering. Is it marketing? Is it real? I don't know. But I think that what we need to do is define what we mean when we say security as a service so that those individuals, those organizations that are looking to utilize security as a service will be much more educated and much more able to adopt security as a service, which will benefit all of us. So we want to provide greater clarity, and we really have three goals. We want to, first of all, define what we mean when we say security as a service. We want to figure out what the buckets are, because there are definitely many. Some people are scanning web apps, some people are doing AV in the cloud. What are those buckets? Because it's not going to be one size fits all. And then, most importantly, once we have things defined, let's provide guidance to the organizations that actually want to adopt security as a service. So the way that we chose to structure the organization, originally we thought, oh, well, we'll have a couple of co-chairs and we'll just hit the ground running. But we had tremendous interest, so we said, hey, let's actually do this as a steering committee. So we have our chair, which is Cameron Smith from Zscaler, and then we have 9 individuals that comprise the steering committee. And that is not to say that everything is structured and done. There is plenty of opportunity to participate. I'll talk about some of the things that we've done, but hey, this is our starting point, and I think we've done a good job of getting some of the best and the brightest and individuals that represent organizations that are both delivering and consuming security as a service. So one of the first things that we did, and this is brand new and it's still open and I want everybody in this room to participate in it, is we put out a very simple survey on Surveymonkey to help us get started. Because remember, those first 2 goals are let's define security as a service, and then let's figure out what all the different buckets are that we can put the various vendors into. And so we just had 4 simple open-ended questions. The first is to figure out those buckets. We said, hey, propose categories of service. Then we said, what are the categories of threats? So, these are the threats that all of these different services are trying to mitigate. Why do they even exist in the first place? Number 3, what are factors that may be affecting enterprise adoption? Obviously, today, security is not typically delivered through a security as a services model. That's a new model for us. It's more typically delivered through hardware and software, but I think that it's inevitable that we're moving down this path. That's why the CSA exists. But what are some of the factors that are causing hesitation? What do we need to do to make sure that we can provide a landscape that people are comfortable with adopting security as a service? And then last but not least, propose areas to consider when defining, because remember, we want to define what security as a service is. So this survey is still open, and I want you to participate. 4 simple questions. Obviously, it'll take about 2 minutes of your time, but it'll help us greatly in achieving our goals. So I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of the results that we've received to date for those first 2 questions. So here is trying to figure out what those buckets are. And you can read probably as well as I can, maybe better. So I'm not just going to list them off, but I'll just talk through a couple of them that to maybe add some clarity. So what we've done is we had these open-ended questions, and we just said, what do you think the categories should be? And then some of the people on the steering committee have tried to put those into different buckets. And right now we're up to about 12 buckets. And this is fluid. This will change. But we have things like intrusion management. That's the vendors that are doing the IDS, IPS type things. Content management, the secure web gateways, the email gateways, data management, DLP, event management. Here's your SIM vendors. Cloud interface and intercloud security. I have multiple clouds, and I want to make sure that my security settings on all these different clouds are equal and equivalent. So I have services for that, networking, distributed denial of service. And then, of course, we have our other bucket to capture the stuff that we still haven't been able to figure out what to do with. But we want you guys to help us figure out what these buckets are, because we need to do that in order to define what we mean when we say security as a service. So the last slide, I'll show you the link to that survey. And again, it's open, and I encourage you to do it. And then what are the threats that all of these different vendors are trying to tackle? And right now we're up to 6 buckets there. Infrastructure threats, things like distributed denial of service, vulnerabilities in shared technologies within these different vendors. Data threats, DLP, privileged user threats. Hey, how do I make sure that somebody can't do something that they weren't supposed to have access to do? External threats. So these are the non-technology threats. Legal issues that, hey, if somebody that's also using my cloud gets sued, do they just pick up that server and walk out the door and my data's gone too? If I'm doing business somewhere in Egypt, that the government shuts down, does all my stuff go along with it? Geopolitical threats. And then email threats and web threats are trying to be tackled here as well. So here's just a very simple roadmap. These are the things that we want to achieve throughout the year. And again, this is fluid, and I'm sure it'll adjust. The survey started last month. It's still open. I encourage you to participate. Here we are at the RSA kickoff. We would like to, I said we have those buckets that we want to define. Late April, we would like to get a version 1 of that. One of the things that we're proposing is that security as a service become a 14th domain in the overall guidance package. And so we'll determine if we want to go down that path. And if we do, we would like to have version 1 of our guidance ready kind of mid-year. We want some subject matter expert guidance. So this is basic guidance. You're an individual in an enterprise, and you want to deploy security as a service, and you're looking for information on how do I do that, what's the best way to approach that. That'll be the SME guide. And then if we do indeed make this a 14th domain, later in the year we want to have that final version to go into version 3, which Archie had talked about earlier. So here's my call to arms. If you want to participate, I encourage you to participate. Don't panic if you can't type fast enough to get this stuff. As Jim said, we'll make the slides available. I added a couple of bit.ly links there to help you out. But first and foremost, cloudsecurityalliance.org/SecAss. Can't forget SecAss, right? That's where you'll get all your information. The survey is open right now. Just a simple Surveymonkey link. I encourage you to do that. We don't have time for questions today, but if you have any questions, secass@cloudsecurityalliance.org. Send it there. And last but not least, of course, we have to have a LinkedIn group. So with that, thank you, and I will now turn it over to Vikas.
So I'm going to talk about the Trusted Cloud initiative, and it can't be timed enough than the Valentine's Day, as with any relationship, you need to build trust. So here, you're talking about how do you build relationship between a trusted relationship between consumers and the providers, between providers itself, or between enterprises and the providers. So Intel is a big proponent of it, and TCI, in its mission, what it is trying to do is look at the model of trust in a holistic fashion by a 3x3 matrix. So where you have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, each of them has different trust requirements. how do you look at it holistically across all these different delivery models, which can be actually be operating in public, private, or hybrid clouds. So issues like governance, identity, authentication, authorization, auditability, how do you take care of these in a consistent way? So the scope is to leverage the breadth and the depth of Cloud Security Alliance initiatives. There are a lot of initiatives that we are looking into and working together, and bring about a reference architecture which is vendor neutral, and provide some sort of implementation references which are open sourced, so that you are not walking away with some diagrams, but actually a set of real implementations that you can use as a reference. So that's the scope that this group is working against, and the principles that are governing, that are guiding this initiative is to develop an end-to-end security model that is not just limiting into one aspect of security, but looking at all the different aspects, and provide centralized security policy model to achieve this. Now, one of the another guiding principles is, I'm not going to go over each of them, but the more important one is that it must support multiple levels of protection that includes network, operating system, and application security needs. So it's very comprehensive. It has several subgroups, and each subgroup has a chair. So there is a subgroup of reference architecture, identity and access architecture, encryption and key management, implementation, and certification. So, and if you come out with a different set of problems, then a separate subgroup can be created as well. Now, what are the key functional challenges that we identify in building the trust? So one is, today, most of these applications are siloed. They want Salesforce, Google, Amazon, or some of these cloud providers, each of them want their own accounts to be created. Instead of trusting an existing account either from another provider or even enterprises that might already have accounts in their identity management systems. So how do you build that trust relationship to prevent these multiple logins? How do you get this end-to-end visibility across all these different accesses that happens to different cloud providers? How do you prevent this manual provisioning process where if I want to access 2 or 3 different cloud applications, I need to go and provision account in each of them, and if the user leaves the company or needs to deprovision, a consumer needs to be deprovisioned from a particular application, you have to go into each of these applications. So how do you create trust so that these manual processes can be eliminated? And then have a way, have a mechanism so that unauthorized data access can be not only detected, but prevented as well. Now, today, if you see, each of these cloud providers have their own audit stores where they log audit data. Each of them have their own audit record formats. It's impossible for you as a consumer or as an enterprise to first get access to this audit data, and second, even if you have access, then they are in different record formats. So assembling that into one audit record format is going to be a challenge. And so we need to work towards a scalable and federated trust model that takes care of all these issues.